if you take a 10-year-old child in Sweden, right, and then you take a 10-year-old child in Germany, both of them are from the exact same demographic, like the exact same income level, the exact same grades in school.
Right.
That child in Sweden has a 25% chance of reaching the highest levels of professional success later in life.
Right.
But the child in Germany,
Yeah.
it's single digits, like completely different outcomes for the exact same kid.
It is, it's a staggering statistic.
It really is. And, well, welcome to a special EmpowerMigra deep dive. In this space, we take a magnifying glass to scientific studies on migration, integration, and discrimination, really trying to understand the hidden architecture of our society.
Exactly.
And today, we are opening up a pretty hefty stack of research to answer one vital question. And that question is a lack of professional and educational success among migrants truly an individual problem, or is it, in many cases, structurally prevented from the very beginning?
Yeah, it's a heavy question, but it's an absolutely necessary one to ask if we actually want to understand how our institutions function, rather than how we simply hope they function.
Right.
Because when we look at those comparative statistics, like you said, 25% versus single digits for the exact same demographic profile, it really forces us to look at the machinery of the society itself.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we all know the common societal mantras. You hear them everywhere, from classrooms to, corporate boardrooms.
Oh, definitely.
People say, if you work hard, you'll make it, or everyone has the exact same chances here.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it sounds fair. It sounds incredibly logical.
Comforting, too.
Right, it's comforting. We are taught from a very young age that society basically operates as a pure meritocracy. You put in the effort, you reap the rewards. But I want to ask you, the listener, an honest question to kind of just hold in your mind as we go through this data today. What if success isn't even intended for some people, no matter how hard they try?
That is the core tension we're looking at today. Because the prevalent public narrative usually goes something like this. When migrants, or, the children of migrants, don't secure good jobs, or they don't achieve high educational milestones, society instinctively blames a lack of effort.
Right, or a lack of motivation.
Exactly. Or, a refusal to integrate. The outcome is framed purely as an individual failure.
Like it's all on them.
Precisely. But the question we have to ask as researchers, or just as analytical thinkers, is whether the data actually supports this narrative of individual failure. Or if we are, completely blind to systematic hurdles that are just baked right into the institutions we trust.
So to test this individual blame narrative against actual reality, we obviously need hard data. We can't just deal in opinions or, a couple of anecdotes from Twitter.
No, of course not.
So we're looking at a highly detailed 2018 study. It's titled A Folk nicht Vorgesehen. And it's authored by Christine Lang, Andreas Pott, and Jens Schneider. And, I mean, the title alone gives you a massive hint of where this is going.
It is a really provocative title, but it is deeply, deeply grounded in empirical research. This study investigates the experiences of the second generation.
The children of immigrants.
Right. Specifically, the researchers looked at the children of Turkish guest workers who came to Germany in the 60s and 70s.
Okay.
These are children who were born and raised in Germany. They are navigating the German education system, the German labor market, and the researchers focused on these areas because these are the exact arenas where society, it decides who gets a chance, who gets promoted, and who gets left behind.
So I'm struggling with the methodology here a little bit. If they want to prove discrimination, why not just compare these children of Turkish immigrants to the average German student?
Wow.
Wouldn't a massive gap in success rates just immediately prove the point?
That is a very common assumption. But sociologically speaking, it's actually a flawed approach.
Oh, really? What?
Because if you compare, say, the child of a low-income immigrant factory worker to the child of a wealthy native-born doctor, you are measuring a massive gap in financial resources, social networks, and cultural capital.
Oh, I see.
Right. So you wouldn't know if the immigrant child's struggles were because they were an immigrant or simply because they were poor.
That makes total sense. You're conflating two different massive hurdles.
Exactly. And that is the brilliant pivot of this study. It was part of a much larger project called Pathways to Success. And what it does is it scientifically separates class from ethnicity.
So what you're saying is they needed a really specific scientific control group?
Precisely. The researchers compared successful children of Turkish immigrants strictly with successful people from native-born, non-immigrant working-class families.
Okay, so families without academic backgrounds.
Right. Families without deep financial resources. And by doing this, they isolated the variables. It allows us to see exactly which barriers are simply about being from a working-class background and which barriers are specifically, undeniably tied to having a migration background.
Wow. That changes the whole perspective because it just completely removes that easy excuse of, well, they just didn't have the money for tutors.
Exactly. It strips that argument away completely.
So looking through this highly controlled lens, what did the researchers actually find? Because the answer really challenges the very core of this whole meritocracy myth we all grew up with.
It does. The findings force a complete reevaluation of how we view achievement, because the data points to a systemic filtering process that happens incredibly early.
How early are we talking?
Very early. The researchers documented significantly lower expectations from teachers directed at children with a Turkish migration background. They found that these children were placed into weaker school tracks much earlier than their native-born peers, even when they were displaying the exact same potential.
The exact same potential. So the barriers to success, they don't pop up at the end of a career path.
No, not at all.
You weren't like running a smooth race and then suddenly hitting a wall right before the finish line. The barriers are literally placed at the very beginning of the journey.
Right. Imagine two kids entering a race.
Okay.
They are equally fast, they are equally smart, but one is forced to wear weighted shoes right from the starting line.
That's going to win.
Exactly. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it raises an incredibly important question about the very definition of achievement.
Yeah.
If a child's educational path is altered at a really young age based on, well, demographic assumptions rather than their actual demonstrated performance, can we really call their final position in society a result of merit?
I mean, no.
Right. Or is it just the logical result of a structural decision that was made for them by an institution?
But I can already hear the counter-argument that people often make in public debates. You know the one?
I think I do.
They say, well, the families just don't value education. The parents don't push them at home. But the study found the exact opposite, didn't it?
It completely refuted that. The text explicitly notes that the parents of these children had incredibly high aspirations for them.
Really?
Yes, I mean, think about it. The whole point of the original migration, leaving their home country, taking on grueling physical labor in a foreign land, it was fundamentally framed as a generational project.
It was about creating a better life for the kids.
Exactly. It was for the next generation. The researchers actually found instances where these working-class immigrant parents were actively moving to different neighborhoods.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, specifically seeking out areas with fewer migrants and a more middle-class demographic, just to try and give their kids a better chance at integrating and succeeding in school.
So they were doing everything right. They were highly motivated.
Deeply motivated. The failure, when it occurred, was absolutely not a lack of family ambition. It was a failure of the institutions to recognize and nurture the child's potential.
But how does this disadvantage actually manifest day to day? Because, when we picture discrimination, we often picture something really loud and aggressive.
Right. A cartoon villain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
A cartoon villain actively blocking someone from entering a building and shouting slurs. But the text shows that reality is far more insidious. Disadvantage happens quietly.
Very quietly.
It's paperwork.
It is entirely administrative.
Yeah.
And to understand this, we need to look at one of the most critical structural bottlenecks identified in the study,
Okay.
which is a specific feature of the German education system. It's called the Schulempfehlung, or the school recommendation.
Right. The sorting hat of the German school system.
That's a good way to put it. In Germany, children are sorted into different educational tracks at a very young age, usually around age 10, right after the 4th grade.
10 years old. That is so young.
It is. And you have the Hauptschule for basic vocational paths, the Realschule for intermediate paths, and then the gymnasium.
Which is the academic track that leads directly to university. And the sorting mechanism, it isn't just a standardized blind test. It relies heavily on the recommendation of the primary school teacher.
And this is exactly where the quiet bias becomes structurally fatal.
There is a quote from the source material that just stopped me in my tracks when I read it.
The one about the mother.
Yes. It's a specific example of a teacher denying a really bright student a recommendation for the gymnasium. And the teacher's stated reasoning was this, and I'm quoting here. The mom doesn't speak German well. The dad works too much. She won't get support at home and will need tutoring.
Yeah. Let's truly analyze the mechanics of that interaction.
Wait.
The teacher, in that specific moment, was not judging the child's intellect. They were not judging the child's potential or their curiosity or their actual academic performance in the classroom.
They were judging the parents.
They were judging the family's social and ethnic background. They were looking at the parents' grueling work schedules and their language barriers, which, by the way, are classic markers of first-generation working-class immigrants.
Yeah.
And based on that, the teacher decided that the child shouldn't be allowed to aim high.
So the system actively penalized the child for the parents' struggles.
Exactly.
And the wild thing is, the teacher might have even thought they were being merciful.
Oh, almost certain.
You can almost hear the internal monologue, like, oh, I don't want to put this poor child in a stressful environment where the parents can't help with homework.
Yes, framing it as protection.
But the result is devastating. It literally caps their potential at age 10. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of lowered expectations.
And because it happens within the bureaucratic framework of a recommendation, it looks perfectly legitimate on paper.
Look at this paper trail.
It doesn't look like discrimination at all. It looks like standard administrative sorting. And this is exactly why the international data we opened with, the comparison between Sweden and Germany, is so vital here.
Right, the 25% versus single digits.
Yes. The researchers utilized data from the broader Pathways to Success project, particularly the TIES study, to look at the exact same demographic across Europe.
So we have a 25% success rate in Sweden and the Netherlands compared to less than 10% in Germany and Austria for the exact same demographic background.
Mm-hmm.
What on earth are Sweden and the Netherlands doing differently?
The answer is the structure of the education system itself. Sweden and the Netherlands utilize comprehensive school systems.
Meaning they don't split them up early.
Exactly. They keep children learning together in the exact same academic environment for much longer before forcing them to diverge into academic or vocational tracks, whereas Germany sorts them at age 10.
Okay, let me see if I grasp the mechanics of this. By sorting them at age 10, the German system structurally amplifies the quiet biases of those primary school teachers.
That's a great way to frame it.
Like if a teacher makes a biased assumption about a Swedish kid at age 10, that kid still stays in the comprehensive system. They have years to mature, take different classes, maybe get a different teacher, and prove that first teacher wrong.
They have time to develop.
But if a German teacher makes that same biased assumption at age 10, that kid is sent down a completely different lower-tier path. They go to a different physical building.
Different peers, different teachers.
Different books. And it becomes structurally nearly impossible to ever recover from that early disadvantage.
You've perfectly captured the mechanism. The early sorting mechanism acts as a massive amplifier for individual bias. It takes a teacher's subjective opinion, which might be steeped in unconscious prejudice, and turns it into an objective, structural barrier that alters the entire trajectory of a human life.
Man. So we've established that just getting the degree is a brutal gauntlet. But let's look at the incredibly resilient few who actually survive it.
The exact.
Right. Against all these odds, against the lowered expectations, against the early sorting, some of these children fight their way through. They get their abitur, they go to university, they get their degrees.
They do everything society asked of them.
Exactly. So what happens when they finally knock on the door of the labor market? Surely, with a university degree in hand, the playing field levels out, right?
Well, you would hope so. But the study shows a deeply complex, often very frustrating landscape.
Of course it does.
The researchers look closely at how these highly successful individuals navigated different sectors of the job market. And they found a really stark difference between what we might call institutionalized paths versus unstructured paths.
What exactly constitutes an institutionalized path in this context?
Think about fields like law and teaching in Germany.
Okay.
To become a fully qualified lawyer or a state school teacher, you don't just get a university degree and start applying for corporate jobs on LinkedIn.
Right, there are state exams.
Exactly. You have to pass rigorous state examinations. And critically, you must complete a state-mandated training period known as the referendariate.
The referendariate.
Yes. And because this path is heavily institutionalized, it offers a somewhat blind entry.
Blind meaning objective.
Yes, meaning if you have the grades, and if you pass that first state exam, you are legally entitled to a spot in the referendariate. The system doesn't care about your last name or your parents' professions at that initial entry point. The grades get you in.
Wait, I'm struggling with this a bit. If you pass a blind state exam in law or teaching, Shouldn't that erase all bias?
You would think.
You have the grade, you get the training spot. How can discrimination possibly survive a blind test?
Because the blind test only gets you in the door. The subtle discrimination simply evolves to fit the new environment.
Like a virus mutating.
Exactly like that. Let's look at the referendariat for teachers, for example. The source material details how migrant and working-class students felt deeply, deeply alienated during this training period.
Even though they had the same grades.
Even though they passed the exact same exams, they got in, but they didn't know the unwritten rules. What sociologists call the hidden curriculum.
Okay, what does that hidden curriculum actually look like in practice?
Imagine a bustling school staff room.
All right, I'm picturing it.
The researchers noted that individuals coming from native-born teacher families, meaning their parents or maybe grandparents were teachers, they knew exactly how to behave.
It was natural to them.
Completely natural. They knew intuitively how to speak to the older supervisors. They knew which school committees were actually worth volunteering for to get promoted and which ones were just busy work. They knew how to navigate the internal, subtle politics of the faculty. They possessed an inherited cultural capital.
And the descendants of the guest workers.
They were entering entirely uncharted territory for their families. They were penalized not for a lack of knowledge in their subject matter. I mean, they proved their knowledge on the state exam, but they were penalized for a lack of familiarity with the institutional culture.
It's like showing up to play a really complicated board game where everyone else has memorized the rule book from childhood.
That's exactly it.
And you are only allowed to read the summary on the back of the box. You're technically allowed to play, but you are at a massive disadvantage in every single interaction.
That captures the feeling perfectly. They have to spend immense, draining energy just deciphering the social codes that their peers understand intuitively.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Now, contrast that highly structured, if imperfect, path with the private sector, corporate business, or even public administration. In these unstructured paths, the barriers to entry are actually much, much higher for this demographic.
Wait, why is the private sector harder? Don't corporations ultimately just want the most talented, profitable people, regardless of their background?
They state that in their mission statements, yes.
But not in practice.
Not in practice, because the hiring process in a corporation is not a blind state exam. It's a series of interviews. It relies heavily on networking.
Right, who you know.
Exactly. In the private sector, structured entry points are largely replaced by subjective criteria. And the most prominent of these is the concept of cultural fit.
Ah, cultural fit. The ultimate vague rejection reason.
Indeed. Cultural fit is often just a socially acceptable, legally defensible way to hire people who look, talk, and think exactly like the people who are already in charge.
It's mirroring.
It relies on network nepotism. If you are the child of a Turkish factory worker, your parents do not have friends who are middle managers at a marketing firm to help you get that crucial first internship.
You completely lack the network.
Furthermore, your internalized social cues and communication styles might not perfectly align with the white middle-class corporate norm.
Which means?
Therefore, you are deemed a poor cultural fit regardless of your actual technical skills or your university grades.
But wait, isn't the public sector supposed to be leading the charge on this?
You mean public administration?
Yeah. You constantly hear rhetoric from city councils and government agencies about intercultural opening, diversity quotas, wanting the civil service to reflect the diversity of the city.
Sure.
Doesn't all that make public administration an easier path?
You are pointing to a very real public discourse, but the study explicitly addresses this gap between rhetoric and reality.
So it's just talk.
The text notes that despite all the loud public appeals for intercultural opening, the actual entrenched barriers to entry remain incredibly stubborn. The researchers found that rhetoric is simply not enough to dismantle decades of institutional bias.
Wow.
Just because a city council prints a glossy brochure saying they value diversity doesn't mean the hiring committee, which is usually made up of 50-something native-born civil servants, has fundamentally changed how they evaluate a candidate.
Right, they still have their biases.
Exactly. If a candidate's resume or their communication style or their background looks different from what that committee is used to seeing, the informal barriers kick in. The implicit biases about what competence looks and sounds like often completely override the official diversity policies.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. We've established that just getting into these spaces is a monumental task.
A huge undertaking.
But let's look at the few who actually survive it. When they finally sit in that corporate boardroom or that public administration office, do they feel like they've won?
Well,
Because upward mobility is always framed as this universally joyous, triumphant thing. You get the degree, you get a big paycheck, cue the inspirational music.
the study paints a much more complicated and honestly often painful psychological picture. It delves deeply into the personal toll of becoming part of this new middle class.
It's not just a happy ending.
No. Upward mobility is not just a change in your tax bracket. It is a profound, often agonizing sociological border crossing.
Border crossing. I love that term.
Yeah.
Because it implies leaving one sovereign territory and entering a completely different one.
Exactly.
With different laws, different languages, different currencies.
Sociologically speaking, that is exactly what is happening. These individuals are leaving the working class, often migrant-heavy, socially marginalized world of their childhood and their family.
Right.
And they are stepping into the white, middle-class, highly academic, mainstream world of their new professions. And these two worlds operate on entirely different logics.
Different vocabularies.
Different vocabularies, different values. The sociological term for this deeply ingrained set of behaviors, tastes, and dispositions is habitus. It's a concept developed by Pierre Bourdieu.
Okay, I want to make sure you, the listener, really grasp this because habitus can sound like a really dry academic term.
It can, yeah.
Explain to me how a clash of habitus actually works in real life.
Yeah.
Like, what does it look like on a Tuesday afternoon at the office?
Okay. To explain habitus, we should think of class mobility less like climbing a ladder and more like undergoing an organ transplant.
An organ transplant? How so?
Imagine the new corporate environment as the host body, and the upwardly mobile migrant employee is the new organ.
Okay, I'm following.
The host body has a very specific immune system. It has a specific way of speaking, a specific set of cultural references, a specific way of signaling intelligence and competence.
Right.
When the new employee enters, their original working class migrant habitus might clash entirely with the host body.
Give me a specific example.
Let's look at a corporate lunch scenario. The native-born middle-class colleagues might be discussing, say, their recent skiing holidays in the Alps.
Sure.
Or debating the merits of different classical music venues. Or engaging in a very specific, polite, indirect style of intellectual debate.
And the new employee, whose parents were factory workers who never went skiing and who grew up in an environment where communication was perhaps much more direct and less steeped in academic irony.
They suddenly feel completely exposed.
Yeah, they must feel like an alien.
Exactly. They aren't lacking technical skill. They're great at their jobs, but they lack the cultural fluency. They don't know the unwritten rules of the corporate lunch.
And the host body senses that.
The host body senses this difference and might passively reject them.
How so?
Maybe not inviting them to the informal drinks where the real promotions are decided, or maybe just viewing them as slightly abrasive or uncultured. To survive, the new organ has to take heavy immunosuppressants.
Wow.
They have to actively suppress their original habitus to avoid rejection.
That sounds utterly exhausting.
It is incredibly draining.
How do people survive that constant tension? Does the study actually identify how these successful individuals manage this intense habitus shift?
Yes. The researchers categorized 3 primary coping strategies from their detailed case studies.
Okay.
The first strategy is distancing.
What does distancing look like in practice?
In this approach, the individual essentially severs ties with their origins. As much as possible, they assimilate entirely into the new elite environment. They might physically distance themselves from their parents' culture, purposefully avoiding migrant-heavy neighborhoods.
So they move away.
Yes, they might soften or change their accents, change how they dress, and meticulously adopt the exact mannerisms and cultural preferences of their native-born middle-class colleagues.
They just blend in.
It's a strategy of survival through minimizing friction. They erase the difference to blend in completely.
That sounds incredibly lonely.
It often is.
To have to cut off a fundamental part of your history, your family's history, just to survive in a boardroom without triggering the corporate immune system.
It's a heavy price.
So what's the second strategy?
The second strategy is almost the exact opposite. It's emphasizing ethnic differences.
Emphasizing them.
Yes. The book cites a fascinating case study of an IT specialist from Berlin. Instead of hiding his Turkish identity or his working-class roots, he leaned into it heavily.
How does that even work in a corporate environment that, as we just discussed, demands conformity?
It requires immense conscious effort. This IT specialist used his background as a shield and a source of immense pride. He proudly built parallel lives.
Parallel lives.
Yeah. During the day, in the corporate German world, he functioned at the absolute highest technical level. But he refused to adopt the middle-class habitus of his colleagues.
Oh, interesting.
He didn't pretend to care about their hobbies or mimic their communication styles. He remained deeply, visibly rooted in the Turkish community.
Wow.
His weekends, his social circle, his cultural consumption were entirely centered around his heritage. He essentially told his corporate bosses, I am highly successful, I am vital to this company, and I am Turkish, and I refuse to dilute either.
I can see how that takes a massive toll, too, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you are constantly demanding that the corporate world accept you on your own terms, which means you are always in a subtle state of conflict or negotiation. You are never just resting.
They're always on guard.
Right. And what is the third strategy?
The third is the balancing act. The researchers note this is perhaps the most common and arguably the most exhausting of the three.
Why is it the most exhausting?
Because these individuals try to juggle the expectations of both worlds simultaneously.
Oh, boy.
They don't distance themselves from their families or their childhood friends, but they also try to fit seamlessly into the middle-class professional world.
They try to be the perfect bridge.
Yes, but the result is that they often feel like an outsider in both places.
Yeah.
They suffer from a profound sense of imposter syndrome in the corporate world, constantly terrified that their working-class roots will show.
Right.
Yet, when they return home, their habitus has inevitably changed. They use different vocabulary. Their political or social views might have shifted.
And their old friends notice.
Exactly. They are suddenly deemed too German or too academic for their childhood friends and family, but they are still permanently marked as the migrant by their professional colleagues. They live in a permanent, hyphenated state of in-betweenness.
It really highlights how making it doesn't mean the struggle is over. It just means the struggle changes shape.
That's a profound way to look at it.
The anxiety of poverty is basically replaced by the anxiety of identity.
Mm-hmm.
But the study also points out a really fascinating, tangible, physical outcome of this new middle class. It's not just psychological. They're actually changing the physical map of the cities.
Yes. The researchers identified a phenomenon we can call the gentrification twist.
I love this part.
It is a brilliant observation in the data, because when we usually think of gentrification, we think of wealthy, native-born individuals moving into working class, often migrant neighborhoods, renovating the buildings and pricing out the locals.
The classic narrative of, the artisanal sourdough bakery replacing the old corner store, driven by people who just moved to the city from somewhere else.
Right. But the study shows a new, diverse form of gentrification. These successful descendants of guest workers who now have high salaries, university degrees, and the cultural preferences of the native middle class, they are choosing to move back to their old working-class neighborhoods.
Wow.
Places like Neukölln in Berlin, or certain industrial parts of the Ruhr area.
So they are returning to the exact neighborhoods their parents originally lived in.
Yes, but they are coming home with massive purchasing power.
That's incredible.
They are the actual locals. They have deep generational roots in the community, but they are driving a new wave of economic upgrading.
Because they want different things now.
Exactly. They want the organic supermarkets, the nice cafes, and the renovated apartments, but they also desperately want the cultural familiarity of their youth.
Right. They want both.
They want the Turkish bakeries and the vibrant street life to remain. It completely complicates the entire narrative of who a gentrifier is. They are literally physically reshaping the neighborhoods that the system originally assumed they would never be able to leave.
That is such an incredible, powerful image. The kids who were told at age 10 by a primary school teacher that they weren't smart enough for the gymnasium are coming back 20 years later and buying the apartment buildings in their old neighborhood.
It is a profound demonstration of resilience.
Yeah.
But as analytical thinkers, we must remember that it is the resilience of the exception, not the rule.
Ah, right.
The data explicitly reminds us that for every one person buying that apartment, dozens upon dozens were successfully filtered out by the system at age 10.
Which forces us to look back at those political and social narratives we opened with. And I want to be very careful and objective here, because we are dealing with data logic, not ideology.
Right.
But we have to confront the arguments that actually exist in the real world.
We must analyze those dominant narratives strictly through the lens of this empirical evidence.
Exactly. If we look at certain political arguments, particularly right-wing narratives that suggest people who end up in the low-wage sector or who don't attain higher education simply lack innate ability, or that they are naturally less capable or actively refuse to integrate.
Yes.
How does the data from success not intended respond to the logic of that specific claim?
Well, the data reveals a massive fundamental logical fallacy in that argument.
How so?
The researchers have empirically mapped a system that systematically places heavy structural hurdles in front of a specific demographic group from the moment they enter kindergarten. A system that actively slows them down and diverts them to lower tracks at age 10 based on subjective bias rather than objective ability.
So what you're saying is if the system is actually designed to produce unequal outcomes, you can't use the unequal outcome as proof of unequal ability.
Exactly. If you systematically trip a runner at the starting line, you cannot scientifically, logically, or morally claim that their eventual position at the back of the pack is purely a reflection of their innate running ability.
That makes so much sense.
You cannot build a system that statistically guarantees a lower success rate for a specific group and then turn around and use that exact lower success rate as proof that the group is inherently less capable. The data clearly shows that the disadvantage is largely manufactured by the institutions, not inherent to the individuals.
Wow. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to address you, the listener, directly. I want you to just sit with a few genuinely uncomfortable questions based on the evidence we've unpacked today. Think about your own workplace, your own corporate lunches, your own kids' schools. If success truly depends only on performance, why do massive comprehensive studies consistently show systematic differences across ethnic lines, even when we completely control for class and income?
Right.
Why are some groups of 10-year-olds sorted out and sent down dead-end paths, despite having the exact same academic potential as their peers? And ultimately, when politicians and institutions promise equal chances, what does that promise actually mean in our society today?
Is it real?
Exactly. Is it a reality, or is it just a comforting illusion we tell ourselves so we don't have to fix the plumbing of our institutions?
What's fascinating here is that the study forces a complete paradigm shift in how we view integration and success.
A complete 180.
Yes. For decades, sociologists, politicians, and the media have been asking the exact same flawed question: why are some migrants not successful? We have been putting the individual subject under the microscope, constantly looking for their flaws, their lack of integration, their lack of effort.
We blame the person.
But based on the data in Erfolg nicht vorgesehen, we have to turn the microscope around.
What's the new question?
The question we must ask is, why do we build, maintain, and fiercely defend systems where success for some people is made statistically unlikely from the very beginning?
We have to stop blaming the runner and start inspecting the track.
Precisely.
If these systems were built by human choices, the choice to sort kids at age 10, the choice to hire based on the vague, exclusionary notion of cultural fit, the choice to let unwritten rules govern our public institutions, then they can be unbuilt by human choices.
They are not laws of nature.
Exactly. Think about the sheer catastrophic waste of it all. What would our economy, our culture, our scientific advancements look like if we actually uncorked the suppressed potential of millions of people who have been historically underestimated?
It would be transformative.
Imagine the brilliant legal arguments, the medical breakthroughs, the innovative businesses we are currently leaving on the table just because a teacher made a biased assumption about a 10-year-old in the 4th grade.
Yeah.
Once you see how the architecture is designed, you really can't unsee it. And the next logical step is demanding a blueprint for something better. That was a deep dive from EmpowerMigra. EmpowerMigra understanding begins with listening.